The goal in your life is not to figure out how to be comfortable in your mental prisons, but to realize that you have the keys to set yourself free. Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Tim Shurr. Welcome to the podcast on how to be mesmerizing. And today we have an amazing guest with us. Liz Kislik is with us today. Liz, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Tim. Happy to be with you.
Thank you. I'm so happy that you're here. So Liz is very accomplished. She's incredible. So I'm not sure I'm going to be smart enough to even have a conversation with her, but I'm going to try. So let me tell you a little bit about Liz real quick. So Liz is a brilliant, very well-known, powerful leadership coach, consultant, speaker. She's done TEDx talks, and she's been working with amazing companies like American Express or the Girl Scouts. You might have heard of them. She got her bachelor's from Yale and her master's from NYU, and so very, very accomplished. Writes for the Harvard Business Review, and just we could go on and on with how fabulous you are. So let's get into that brain of yours and see what we can learn. So I know that one of your big things in your TED Talk was on handling conflict in the workplace and handling conflict in general, right? So over your beautiful 30-year career of doing this stuff and studying this, what are some things that you've learned, the real golden nuggets that you've learned about us humans and conflict?
Well, us humans, we fall into it remarkably easily.
Yes.
And we think most of the time that conflict at work is about the person we're having the conflict with, as opposed to the circumstances that create a reason for conflict. Most of what goes wrong at work in terms of conflict is because there are structures in the way, or the processes don't accommodate what you need to do, or there are historical norms that you didn't know and you happen to violate, and then everybody hates your guts. So there are all kinds of things that are in place, and then what goes wrong between the humans kind of lies on top of that and is the ugly part we notice. And we think it's about the other person, and we get mad at the other person, and we may even think they're a bad person. But there's really all this stuff underneath that if we could tease it out and work on it together, we'd find that the other person isn't so bad. We're both struggling in the same environment.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love how you said that. I find that a lot of people are, just like what you said, the conflict starts because maybe of a process or a system that they have, or a piece of software that's not working. I have a client in healthcare. I have one in retail sales, and they're struggling with the same things. It's the actual processes that people are getting frustrated with. And a lot of times the companies are saying, we don't have the money. It would cost millions of dollars to change some of this stuff.
Right.
So how do you deal with it then?
Okay, so you start to deal with it by first identifying what's really in the way and making sure everybody understands that. Because the most important thing is, in a sense, it's like playing your cards open hand. Everybody can see what you've got. You see what everybody else has.
Yeah.
If everybody's on the level about what's going on, say we've been given a project deadline that we all know is unrealistic. So our fighting about it amongst ourselves, well, we're all just bloodying each other. That's no good. We've got to go back to the source of the deadline and everybody explain what would be practical to do. How much can we accomplish, or what could we change if we had these resources, etc. And see, can we get any leeway? Is there any way to shift? But doing it together gives you more impact in dealing with even an intractable situation. Maybe there's no money for new software, but maybe we can come up with a joint workaround instead of the two sides working separately, trying to find their own either workarounds or work-throughs, and therefore being in conflict with each other. It's actually better if both sides are in conflict with the system, with the software, and then the humans are working together to come up with the best possible solution.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that, Liz.
Hard, very hard.
That. Well, it's harder without the system that you just laid out. Because a lot of times, I had an old trainer that said that you got to have a common enemy, and the common enemy can't be each other.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if the common enemy is each other, then we're going to have all kinds of problems. But you really just mapped it out. I mean, you just like a 3-step step. This is your book, right? So transparency, right? So we got to be honest, because if you don't give, I was doing a program yesterday and I said, if you don't control the story and give the perspective, people are going to make up their own. And
Correct.
then you're going to have 100 and something or thousands of stories instead of one. So you got to have transparency. Yes. And the second thing you said is that what can we do? Right. Instead of what we can't do, right? Well, what can we do with what we have? And then the third one, a joint workaround where we're doing it together.
Yes.
That's brilliant. I love it. I love it.
So I just want to say, Tim, the what can we do? It's really so important, because part of what happens in an organization is we get used to what we can't do. We get used to the idea of being constrained. Yeah. And we have to spur each other on to think about, how could we make this better, even in small ways, so that we don't get stuck now both being hopeless together. Because there's almost always something. It may not be enough, but if you start, if you get a little wiggle room, you get a little traction, then you can build on that. Then you can make a better case about why something else should change so that you can go forward, or let's shift the priorities, or whatever it is.
That makes so much sense. It's interesting, as I was going through your materials, one of the things that really caught my attention, you said that there's a lot of times where people think that the breakdown is with communication or with different personality types, and that conflict is bad. But you're saying that occasionally conflict can be good. And there's a lot of myths out there that, people are misunderstanding. And so can we talk about that a little bit? Maybe some of the myths that you have found that people are commonly accepting that aren't really accurate?
So I guess the first thing I'd say is that when people hear the word conflict, they think it means a bad thing. As if you have to, like strap on your armor and go into it, and you have to win. Okay. And that's part of why we think it's so terrible, and we gear ourselves up to be mad at other people. When we talk about a schedule conflict, we understand it's just two things trying to coexist in a space where only one fits. We don't think about it as having this kind of moral or emotional cast to it. And so one of the myths is that conflict happens because you're against each other. You don't have to, you just have different things going on. Yeah. And to your earlier point about transparency, if you explain what those things are, sometimes the conflict just goes away by itself. It doesn't even exist anymore, because the two sides or opponents didn't really understand what was going on with the other one. Or sometimes it gives you the Venn diagram, and you can look at the overlap and say, well, that's where we're strong together. How can we work from that place? Yes. Yeah. So that would be some of it.
It's really good. I mean, I have embarrassingly have had conversations and arguments with my wife where we were arguing about, we agreed on the same thing, but we didn't know it. Right. We were just taking two different viewpoints or perspectives on the same thing. And, and that's a lot of times exactly what happens. Right. We're so caught up in, trying to save face or save our ego or trying to be right. We're not taking time to understand the other person's point of view. I always say, I know what my cards are. I want to know what your cards are.
Right. Right. Yeah. Right. And it's amazing how easy it is, because you get stuck in your head your thoughts about it and the words you're using, and you almost don't even hear the other person.
Yeah.
So one of the things that can help a lot, actually, is if you have a third party who's there who can say, wait a second, I think you guys are actually saying the same thing. And if somebody said to you, Tim, aren't you saying this? And said to your wife, aren't you saying that? And you both say yes. And they say, oh, well, look how that's just the same. Oh,
I should have called you years ago.
It's a big surprise. Yeah. So
it is a good surprise.
Yeah. Often there's really nothing there that's so terrible.
So much conflict between us humans would be resolved if we were just a little more respectful in our communication, right? It's not what we're talking about, it's how we're talking about it. And so if we were being more kind and thoughtful about how others are feeling, regardless of whether we disagree or not, if we're taking care of each other, so much of this would get worked out faster.
Yes, but that's really, really, really hard to do. You know why? Because we get triggered.
Yeah.
And so sometimes people are, what's the phrase? I respectfully disagree or something, and they're thinking you should drop dead. So the real thing is a kind of emotional self-awareness and the ability to self-regulate, so that if you feel that you're triggered, you know how to calm yourself so you can actually pay attention to what the other person is saying.
Yeah. And it is shocking how bad everybody is at doing that. Right? We're just not really haven't taught emotional intelligence. You and I get it because it's our thing. We love it. We studied it. We're all into it. But most people have no idea what's triggering them, how the triggers got connected inside of them, where those buttons came from, how to stop from reacting.
That's right.
Yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So when I always ask people this because I'm always curious about how you handle it, because whenever you're working with people, you're going to get resistance. No matter how brilliant you are, you're going to have pushback, right?
Absolutely.
And so what are some ways that you help people get past their own resistance?
So just like the conflict thing, the first thing is to understand why the resistance exists and where it's coming from. People are not resistant if they think they're going to be happier and more successful doing the thing you just suggested. Then they're not resistant. They may say, I need help. They may say, I'm not sure how to get out of my own way. But then you're in dialogue already. They're resistant if they assume you are asking them to give something up, if they think their life is going to be harder, and particularly, and this is true of any kind of change initiative, if they feel at risk, if they think, oh, now I'm going to look stupid, or this won't work for me and I'll be a failure. As soon as that cascade of bad thoughts starts, you get resistance, partially because they're resistant to themselves. Once somebody's in that mode, they're shutting down. So you don't want to come at somebody with this whole big program. It's going to be so great for you. You have to sort of start at the beginning a little bit and get them curious about it so that they actually want to know. As soon as you are forcing someone to pay attention, you've already lost them.
Yeah, that's really good. Getting people to know right up front what's in it for them, and because people are always interested in that. You're right. We're not resistant if we think it's going to be great.
Right. Exactly.
It's only our fear that somehow it's going to get worse, or I'm going to look bad, or you're going to make me look bad, or in front of my peers, or, stuff like that. Then people get real defensive real quick.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So, you talk about, in your program, too much peaceful tranquility can sometimes keep you stuck. So where'd you come up with that observation?
Sometimes when everything just stays the same and you start feeling normal and calm and quiet and complacent.
Yes.
And it seems all safe and cozy, but that's when somebody else can eat your lunch. You start losing market share because other people are out there looking around and hunting and trying to find things, and you're just calm and quiet and not doing anything new. So you got to stir yourself up a little sometimes, and that's to do something different from what you've done before, or to be willing to take the risk to try something new. Mm-hmm. So too tranquil is not good. I like the idea of a kind of peacefulness that holds a creative tension. So you can be calm while things are going on, even if some of the things are challenging. But if you're kind of inert in that flatlining way, nothing's going on, and you need to juice up the situation to have any kind of growth or positive change.
Yeah, that's really great. So, if you're not being challenged in some way, then you're not going to grow. And so that line is always moving. And if we're not moving with it, it's going to pass us by. And then we're going to be like, what happened?
Right.
And then instead of being proactive, we're trying to catch up to everybody.
Right. And that's exactly right.
Yeah, that happens so many times. There's so many examples of businesses that used to be in business that aren't anymore because they got complacent or cocky. Right. And as soon as you start to get arrogant, it's like God's going to humble you.
It's amazing how that happens. Yes. And even if it's just letting things that have worked, I'll give you an example I'm going through right now. Okay. So I have a perfectly nice website, mm-hmm. but it's been a perfectly nice website for a couple of years already.
Yes.
You can't afford to just leave things, because then all of a sudden one day you figure, oh my God, that's too old. So I'm already working with my agency and we're going to freshen it up.
Nice.
Not that anything's actually broken, but you have to look at things. Maintenance is really a pain in the neck and most people don't like it. Yeah. But you have to think about, are we fresh enough? Yeah. What else is out there? Are we taking advantage of, there's so many resources. Are we looking at how we can do the best thing now?
Yeah. And one of the mistakes that we make, I think, is that even in a team, so many people are like just individuals that are part of a group, but they're not really a team. And so, we look to ourselves to try to figure out everything instead of relying on the brain trust around us. So when you reach out to your agency and you're like, hey, what can we do to just put a fresh coat of paint on this? Because your site is great. The information, the content's awesome. So maybe a fresh coat of paint, right? We'll just give it that new life that you're looking for. And trying to figure what that's supposed to be all by yourself, that's hard.
Right. We don't all have every skill we need to make us be successful. That's why I have a coach. Mm-hmm. I have the agency to turn to. Yeah. I have people I discuss, what's in the news with. You need people outside yourself because all your customers aren't like you. Mm-hmm. So you need different viewpoints to be able to respond to different people. If any of us was enough on our own, I guess if you're a prepper and you're willing to live off the grid, that's one way. But if you're actually trying to build a business, you have to take into account lots of different kinds of people.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. And so, but again, we don't, because we have these ideas or beliefs that mess with us, right? Or we're not trusting one another. Just seems like there's just so much mistrust going on these days. And so, it keeps us playing the same game that we've been playing, which is, I guess, good because you and I, it keeps us having a job, right? But
yes. Well, that is true. Although I do have a kind of fantasy that if everybody really was more willing to work together, there would actually be more work to do.
That's beautiful. I really love that. You have just changed a belief in me. So thank you very much. That was really awesome. I love that.
That's
Yay.
Good. I'm giving you because the people who are too defensive, they won't even hire us.
Right. Yeah. Which is good. Before I used to get frustrated and now I'm like, thank you. Because if they don't have that vision at the top, right, then no matter what you do, it's not going to work.
That's right.
I've battled with one company comes to mind where I just tried and tried and tried and it just was not going to happen. And then it didn't happen. And so, but there's other companies that I love. It's like going in and it's like my family and like, hey.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Why bloody your forehead against a brick wall?
Yeah.
And to your point about vision. So there has to be the vision and there also has to be the appetite for the work. because the vision doesn't just manifest itself by virtue of somebody having the thought.
Yeah.
The work has to happen. And sometimes people don't have the grit to actually do the work, because when you do the work, then you have the mistakes, and then you have the trial and error and all the things that we deal with, every business deals with, but you have to be willing.
Yeah. Well, that's why we have the power of the team, right?
Yes.
Because there's some people that are visionaries. There's some people that are the doers. They're going to do the work and get things done because staying busy makes them feel safe inside. And so they're constantly busy doing something. And then you're going to have the people who are sitting back going, well, that's not going to work, you know, and they're giving you perspective. And so if you have all the different characters, that's why diversity is so powerful.
Agreed. Agreed. And it helps you have different kinds of achievement and accomplishment.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me about that. Different kinds of achievements and accomplishments. What do you mean?
So it's exactly like what you said. There are some people who really get a thrill out of doing, out of getting the job done, being able to cross it off their list. There's a real satisfaction from the closure of having it done. Not just what it accomplishes, but the fact that it's finished.
Yeah.
And then they can go on to the next. And there are other people who don't get satisfaction out of that at all. They get satisfaction out of having the big idea, exactly as you said before.
Yeah.
So we're all different, and putting it together just lets you build a stronger, whatever it is, product, service, execution, whatever the thing might be.
Brilliant. Brilliant. So let's switch gears for a second. So I always love going through different experiences through the eyes of somebody else. And so what was it like for you? What's it like to go to Yale or to work with American Express or to have some of those experiences?
In a way, it's like any other new thing you take on at any time. You think you know what it's going to be. You have some ideas. This will be what it's like when I get there. And then when you get there, it's a little different from what you expected, and you have to figure out how to deal with what is.
Yeah.
And like anything else, whether it's, I don't know, shopping for a new pair of shoes or dating or raising children, some of it's better than you expected. Some of it's not so hot and you wish it wasn't there. You know, it's all of life is that way. The opportunity to work at a high level is really rewarding because it lets you do things you haven't done before. And that's exciting. I mean, I'm a very curious person. I always want to know why stuff works and how it works. And I love to meet different kinds of people because I just want to know, you know. So any of those experiences have been great for me as a way of broadening my picture of the world and letting me see where I can have impact and also learning what's not for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really the only way that you can get really clear on what you enjoy the most is you got to go have all these experiences and then find out. People want to talk all about the meal before they've actually had a bite.
Right. And a certain amount of that adds to positive anticipation, but too much of that actually creates expectations that then can't be met. So there's an interesting middle ground of thinking about it enough, but also getting into it and then seeing what's, you know, in a weird way, that's really like the idea of prototyping and beta testing as opposed to just planning forever.
Right.
You got to put something into the market and see how the market reacts. Whether the market is your customers or your employees or your colleagues, whatever it is. You know, a trial balloon is good. Then you get feedback.
Well, I think that that's the real distinction of where business is headed in the 21st century. Is that the old approach was we're gonna plan a lot, we're gonna talk a lot, we're gonna have a million meetings, we're gonna put something out there, and then even if it's not going well, we're gonna stay with it forever.
Right.
And now we have this digital mindset, right? This entrepreneurial mindset where we're gonna throw something out there right away or a couple of things and test and test and test do all
Right.
these split tests until we find something that hits. And it makes a lot of people uncomfortable. And so you'll start to find, and I know you have, where the different generations are having some conflict. You know, the baby boomers and the millennials or Generation Z, you know, and whoever's coming next, because the mindsets are totally different. So how are you working with that? And what are some things that you're learning by dealing with that?
So that's a great question, Tim. And I'll tell you what I really think. I don't think there is as much generational conflict as we make out to be.
Yes, I agree. It's beautiful.
Lots of places where I go, people complain about the millennials, blah, blah, blah. But in fact, it's the same thing as whether you like the music you didn't grow up with or not. And are you willing to actually listen to enough of it to see, oh, I do like that. I may not like all of it, but I like those 4 songs, which is very different from saying, I only like my old stuff.
Yeah.
I think in the workplace, for every generation, it is hard to confront the possibility that there might be somebody who's eventually going to have your job. Is there still a place for you? So that's one thing. And the second thing is, do they listen to you and respect you the way you prefer to be heard and respected?
Yeah.
And younger people coming into the workplace, they don't know all the things that we know or that our elders knew. Yeah. And so they'll behave a little differently. And that can, you know, put a crick in some people's neck and they get distressed about it. But in fact, if you stop thinking about the millennials and instead think about Andy and Susan and Deborah and how you work with them and what skills and strengths they bring, very often you can actually get to the point of a kind of reverse mentoring where the younger people have loads of things that they can teach their elders. Mm-hmm. And exactly to your point before about diversity, it helps strengthen the team.
Yeah.
So looking at it as a monolith is, I think, where we get into trouble.
Well, you hit it right on the head when you talked about the labeling, because as soon as we're labeling people, you know, and putting them into this box, right, then that's where it starts to go wrong, because that's now right, you've created an enemy. And the right, goal is not to create an enemy. We're supposed to be cooperating and collaborating, not that's competing right, against our own team.
Right.
But that's the mistake people make. And so I love that. You know, diversity is, you know, comes in lots of forms. And if you embrace them, as like you said, this is Jane and this is Michael. And it's the mentoring is going both ways.
Right.
So when I'm working with, you know, different generations, it comes back to respectful communication.
Yes.
Maybe creating a one-sheet user manual. This is how I respond best. You know, right, this is what I like. This will right, push my buttons.
That's great. Great idea. Yes, yeah. When I have one earbud in, it doesn't mean I'm not listening to you.
Yeah.
That's a hard one.
That's really good. Yeah. And that's really good. That is an example of an unconscious bias that we have.
Yes.
So, and I believe that you are into that stuff, and I am too. You know, I've been studying the human mind forever. I love figuring out unconscious biases, because what it really is it's our beliefs. And if you upgrade those, yeah.
Right. And that's why I like the idea, whether it's conflict or this generational thing, of actually being curious instead of reviewing your own assumptions in a constant loop. Because you end up dumbing yourself down if you say, oh, that's Steve, he's a millennial, they're all such and such a way. Then you're not even paying attention to who Steve actually is.
Right. Yeah.
You've put Steve in a box, then you're trying to interact with a box. Well, that's no good.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Yes. And so just helping people become aware of that. I have a friend that said one of the most powerful phrases that she uses to deal with, to improve communication or conflict resolution is she says, you know, you might be right.
I love that. I say that too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so powerful
Right.
because it opens up the idea. Because if I come in already convinced that what I'm doing is correct, then I'm not opening myself up to any
Right.
kind of learning, growth, or feedback.
That's right. I want to give an alternative for people who are not willing to go that far.
Okay.
Okay, because some people are not willing to say that because they think they're giving too much ground.
Okay.
So if you want to moderate that a little, you could just say, well, that's an interesting point.
Yeah.
But you have to say it like you think it's interesting.
Yeah.
You know, you may not have
Well, that's
figured it out
interesting.
yet. Right. That's right. If you do, well, that's interesting with the eye roll, no good. But if Sam Horn talks about this, if your eyebrows are up, people know you're actually interested, because when we get curious about things or engaged, our face is more mobile and our eyebrows naturally go up. So don't force them up, but notice if they're up. Right.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And it's little things like that, you know, in our body language and our nonverbals and what our body is saying on our behalf.
Yes.
Right. And so little things like that, little, what people will call hacks, right? These days, nonverbal hacks, like lifting your eyebrows up, leaning forward, smiling a little bit more. Right. So that you're just showing that, hey, I'm curious to learn why you think what you think. Yeah. I'm not agreeing with it. I'm just curious how you arrived at this point of view.
Right. Tell me more about that.
Yeah.
Great.
I was working. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's just a great opener.
Yeah.
Don't cut them off. Get more information. Then you can always make your judgment that you don't like it, but have them feel heard first.
And how are you going to really know if you don't like it if you don't understand how they arose or how they arrived at that idea? Right. So I had a very successful guy who built a big software company and then sold it and then built another and sold it. And so he's, you know, living all over the country, and a very smart guy, very type A driven. And he would talk about how he'd be in his meetings and he would listen enough to the meeting before he would finally say, I already have the solution, enough. This is what we're going to do. And I said, you're probably not really actually listening to anybody. You're just putting in your time until you've decided that you've heard enough before you roll out your vision. And they know it. Right. And that shuts down, as brilliant as he is, it shut down any other ideas that he could have got from the masterminding with his team.
That's right.
Yeah. And he really had to think about that a little bit, because I was challenging him hard, because why not? That's my job.
Right. Now, sometimes, I mean, I had a client, what he would do, he would start checking his watch.
Oh, gosh.
Okay. And everybody knew.
Yep.
We couldn't get him to stop checking his watch. But what they learned to do was then end the meeting, in effect.
Yeah.
And start fresh another day.
There you go.
Maybe they only got 15 minutes in.
Yeah.
Okay. He heard that much. Once somebody's mind is closed, there's no point.
Yes. Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah, I have a program called Mesmerizing Meetings, and so that is definitely, you know, we want to try to get the meetings as short and lasered as possible. And like you're saying, if somebody they're not open to it, then you're wasting time.
Right.
Yeah.
Let it go.
Just let it go. Start again another time.
Right. So, maybe you'll find a better tack.
Or figure out why, what triggered him looking at the watch.
Right.
So, yeah.
Who got boring is really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are the kinds of questions that you and I are into, right?
Right. That's
We take it to a whole other level.
Right. No,
because
that's right.
The farther you get back, you know, most people try to pull a weed by cutting the top off of it. And we want to get way down into the root system so we can pull it out and then plant a flower.
Right.
And so, but most people are just kind of rolling over the weeds, you know, or throwing dirt over them.
Right.
You know, so that, oh, well, they're not there anymore.
Right.
Well, they're there.
They come up again.
That's exactly right. So is there anything in particular that you're looking forward to accomplishing over the next couple of years, something that's on your bucket list or something that you would really enjoy experiencing?
So I am working on a book. I've just started on that.
You have so much wisdom. You have to get it out of you and put it to
that's
paper.
Really nice. Thank you, Tim. It's hard work. it goes exactly to the point of things we've talked about earlier in this conversation. It's really hard for me.
Let me help you with that. We're going to change it right away. I want you to repeat after me. It's getting easier for me now.
It's getting easier for me now.
Okay, good. So one of the things that you can do, because it was really hard for me too, and now I've written a few of them. And so there's different ways of doing it. You can do the old school approach, which is sit down and grind it out and everything. But you and I are a little too hyper and for that, because we want to go out and move around. And, we'd probably rather listen to audiobooks than have to read a whole bunch of books because we just like the energy of it. So for you, what you might do is do short little recordings like this, or what's the first chapter of your book? What's the main point you want to make? And then ask yourself a question and then just start recording your answer and have somebody else type it up and edit it for you.
Right. In fact, I'm working with somebody, so that I have a person there.
Yes.
Because for me, I don't care if I know stuff. The question is the dialogue useful?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to replicate that a little. We'll see how it works. I'll let you know.
That's fun. I like that a lot because for us, the point is the conversation.
Yeah.
And if you're sitting there just having a conversation with yourself, it's probably not as fun.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's brilliant. There's a lot of people that their book was basically just an interview, and they had people interview them, and they wanted them to ask specific questions, and then they would, so that it had an outline to it.
Right.
Yeah. So, because you have brilliant stuff, even with your 3-step process of transparency. What can we do? And then, joint workarounds. I mean, I love that.
Great.
Simple, brilliant, and yeah.
It's pretty straightforward. All of this stuff, it's just a chain of different actions and thoughts.
Yes.
So theoretically, it's simple, but we get so caught up in it that it's hard to see your way through in a clear, calm kind of way. Going back to your earlier points about conflict.
Yeah. And that's because people are trying to change the behaviors. They're not changing the beliefs. And so if you don't change the beliefs, we're back to the weed example again. We're just throwing dirt over it.
So what's interesting? It can go both ways.
Okay.
Sometimes if you change the behavior, the belief will follow.
Brilliant.
But think about how often we have a habit. I would like to, I'm thinking of Charles Duhigg's book on habit, and how he used to get a cookie every afternoon, and he had to figure out why he was doing that and all that. But it's actually changing the behavior and coming up with the rationale. Because sometimes just knowing that the behavior change would be better doesn't actually prompt you to do it.
Oh, for sure.
You got to get the practice in. Who's very good on that? BJ Fogg.
Okay.
And what does he call it? Tiny habits? But he writes excellent stuff on behavior change.
Yeah. Just little changes.
Yeah.
Not these big giant changes, but tiny little changes.
He talks about flossing one tooth.
Yeah, one tooth. Washing one fork. If you're going to do the dishes, wash a fork.
Exactly.
Then you're going to need a plate.
Right.
Yeah, that's really good. And that, you're right. A lot of times doing behaviors will cause you to have a new experience, and that shifts the belief.
That's right.
So now we could talk more about beliefs, but what I'd rather do is point out what you and I are doing together, which is we're finding ways to grow, and we're looking at different ways of doing it. So I'll say, you got to change the belief to change the behavior. And then you're like, yeah, but you can also change the behavior to change the belief. Right. That's the power when we put both of our brains together.
Right.
And that's what brings us back. We close that loop on, building powerful teams and reducing conflict is the power of the group.
And look at what else. Okay. We're not mad at each other.
Oh, no.
We came from two separate perspectives.
Yeah.
And not only are we both thinking, oh, yeah, that could be right, we're actually kind of entertained by it.
Yeah.
Oh, look, there's a different way to look at this. Maybe we could try that out. The ability to be excited by the possibilities makes your day go better even when everything is sucky. It just says, maybe it could be better. Good. Let's try it.
Yeah. Start with the question.
Right.
How could we make this better? How
Right.
could we have more fun with this?
Right.
And start pointing your brain.
Right.
I love that. I love that. That you're exactly right. We got to bring fun to it. The more fun you have, the more successful you are. And, I'm showing up wanting to learn, right? And excited about how you're saying things and the metaphors you have, the exercises you use, the way that you process it. I love that, right? As opposed to showing up, because I've had this before, and I'm sure you probably have, where or I'll be interviewed on somewhere and on a podcast, and the person that's doing the interviewing spends the whole time talking. And it's like, well, if you were going to do that, why'd you have me on?
Right. Right. That's a hard thing. That's an interesting thing, Tim, because then what it really is about that person wanting to share their knowledge, which can be fabulous if that's what they're supposed to be doing, as opposed to building new knowledge together, which is what you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, my audience already knows me and what I'm going to say. I want them to know you so that they can gain from all the wisdom and the experiences that you've had over all these years, which is just amazing. So if you were gonna, if you could go back and talk to the little girl that you once were, what advice would you give her based on the things that you've learned?
Okay, that is very interesting. So I think, well, I would tell her not to worry so much.
Yeah.
Because things do mostly work out. As long as you're alive, you can take a stab at it. Yeah. And I would also tell her that you find your people and you find the ways you want to be in the world. But you do that by observing and by experimenting.
Yeah.
It's not just a given. So don't be worried about that. Just go and try new ways and meet new people, and you'll figure it out.
I really like that a lot. So can you expand a little bit? There's so many people that feel isolated. And how do you find your people? And I know you just gave the answer, but let's, observe, experiment, try new things. But what are some thoughts that you might have on how do you find your tribe?
You also have to put yourself where people are.
Yeah.
If you just stay where you are thinking that there's going to be some magical tracking beam, doesn't happen. Yeah. So in your work environment, it could be as simple as greeting people in the break room and smiling more. And then by saying good morning, you know, 20 Mondays in a row, and then they look for you to greet you, and then you can start to have more conversation. Or you can come up with cross-functional reasons to meet other people and expand your knowledge, your sense of neighborhood in the organization, and even your sphere of influence. And in the rest of your life, besides just consciously being nice to your neighbors, which is a wonderful thing and everybody should do, and then every neighborhood would be nicer. Yeah. You can also look for organizations to join, which could be cultural, could be artistic, could be religious, political, whatever it is. Look for things to participate in. Yeah. And then you're doing something you care about, and you're more likely to find like-minded people if they also care about that thing. And you don't have to be a perfect match. You just have to be a pleasant match. And then you see if it turns into anything.
That's nice.
It's always good to know more people who are nice to you and you can be nice to. It's wonderful.
Yeah. And if you want to find those nice people, you got to show up that way.
Yeah.
Right. I love what you said. Yeah. You got to go first. I love what you said, for 20 Mondays.
Right.
Not just for one Monday or maybe 2 Mondays.
Right.
For 20 Mondays, you got to show up. Because people sometimes still ask me, let's say, how long do I have to do this stuff? And I'm like, till it works and it sticks and it's a habit.
That's exactly right. Till it works.
Yeah.
Till you see something. Yes.
Yeah. I also like what you said too about, it doesn't have to be perfect. It can be pleasant. And because sometimes you have to go through one door for the other door to open.
Yes.
And so I had a friend that she was wanting to find a community for herself. She didn't have any family. She didn't have any friends. And so I started coaching her and we kind of became friends, but she needed more. And so I recommended this successful women's group where these wonderful women would get together, and she didn't have a business, but I told her to just go hang out and visit with the group anyway.
That's great.
And she did, and she joined, right? And I'm like, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And then she went there for many months, had great relationships, really enjoyed the community. And then one day someone invited her to a writer's group, because she came to me because she wanted to write a book and she felt stuck. She had to go through that experience, and then it eventually led to a writer's group that she didn't even know about. And now she's writing her book.
That's fabulous, Tim, because what you've illustrated so well is sometimes when the door opens, it's not taking you to your final fabulous, this is the home, this is everything I ever wanted. Sometimes it's just taking you to another door. That's okay too.
Yeah, that's really good. So we've been going on and on. What's the best way for people to find more about you, find out more about you, or bring them into their company's organizations so that they can get some of this amazing insight from you? What's the best way?
Oh, thank you. So my website is really the best way into almost anything. That's lizkislik.com.
Okay.
And on there, if people want a kind of starter, there's an ebook. It's a field guide on how to deal with the interpersonal parts of conflict in your workplace. So people can sign up for that, and also they can get my weekly blogs, my monthly newsletter, if they're interested in that kind of thing. But there's a lot of material on the website.
There is, and there's some really powerful articles. I was going through and trying to read as many as I could. You have so much great content on things that matter the most, because I'm in there working with these companies, and I'm like, wow, that's a great topic. Yep, we need that. Yep, we need that. And I'm like, wow, this is really good. And so everybody should go and download Liz's ebook for the interpersonal tools, because we all need that. So make sure you do that. So lizkislik.com for all that great stuff. Liz, this has been absolutely wonderful. I've had so much fun. I've taken so many notes. This has just been a blast. So thanks so much for being on this show with me today.
It's really been a great pleasure talking to you, Tim. And you have good questions, and you know how to go with the conversation. And that's great. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you. Is there any last thought or message that you want to share with our listeners?
I think the thing I would say is there's actually no reason to give up. There is something to do. Even if you have to get help from somebody else, show your vulnerability. There is always something to do to make the situation better. So look for it, and then you can move ahead. That's really good. That's right. That comes back to what kind of questions are you asking yourself? Right. Are you focused on why you can, or are you focused on how you can? Right. Exactly so. Ladies and gentlemen, Liz, this was fabulous. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here today. Really great. Yeah, a pleasure. Thank you. And everybody that's listening, of course, we do this for you. So thanks so much for being a part of our program. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and all the nuggets of wisdom that Liz has dropped for you today. I strongly encourage you to go back, listen to this program again, share it with your friends, share it with your teams, because you have a team huddle, and listen to this podcast, and you're going to get so much from it. So thanks so much for being a part of our community today, and make today count, make it a sure success, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye. Hey, it's Tim Shurr. Would you like to learn my best secrets for how to be mesmerizing? Then head over to www.survivingtothriving.me and download a free copy of my Mesmerizing Mindset Secrets. That's www.survivingtothriving.me. I'll see you there.